Hi, I'm Chris, the on-farm network agronomist with the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers. In this presentation, I will go over the results from our pea foliar fungicide trials that were held in 2025. Before we start, let's first look at understanding a bit more about a serious disease in field peas. Mycosporella blight, also called Ascochyda disease complex, is our main yield robber and target disease of fungicides in field peas. So let's take a look at the life cycle. It overwinters in soil, on crop residues, and on infected seed. In early summer, airborne ascospores are released and travel long distances. Most often, early symptoms appear as freckles on the lower leaves or as ringed lesions in the mid canopy. Over summer, these lesions expand, and secondary infections by rain splash and high humidity moves the infection up the crop canopy. And then after harvest, pea residue, soil, and seed can carry on the disease life cycle. Fungicides are applied when the disease risk is high around early flowering, when these initial infection symptoms are popping up to limit disease spread up the canopy. Finally, in terms of reducing sources of infection, use certified disease-free seed and follow a minimum 5-year pea crop rotation. You can also work in crop residue immediately following harvest. So with that, let's talk about on-farm trials comparing pea fungicide strategies. We have two trial types, the first comparing a single fungicide application at flowering versus none, and the second trial type comparing a single fungicide application made at early flowering compared to two fungicide applications, or a double. In 2025, we compared four single fungicide application trials that are circled in red on the map and one double fungicide application trial up in Swan River that is circled purple. We'll now talk about these two trial types. Starting with the single application versus none trials, the objective is to evaluate the impacts of a single fungicide application compared to none in field peas. Will an application reduce Ascochyda blight disease pressure? Will it improve yield and provide a return on investment? It's been more common in the drier years for farmers to compare a single versus none, asking the question, do I need that fungicide application in a dry year? And the second pea fungicide trial type is comparing two applications of fungicide versus just one. The questions we're looking to answer are, will an additional application 10 to 14 days later reduce disease pressure, and will that provide a return on investment? In the wetter years, it's been more common to compare single versus double applications, asking the question, do I need that second application to protect and maintain pea yield? So starting with the single versus none trial overview, the three treatments we had were one, no fungicide, two, single fungicide, and 3 out of 4 trials had a third treatment of a single fungicide plus a biostimulant tank mix. The biostimulant in this case was Wave from UPL. The single fungicide application or the tank mix were both made at the beginning bloom stage or R2. And we tested 3 different fungicides, Delero, ReviPro, and Zitigo PRM. The data we collected on this trial was plant stand. We performed a disease rating, and we collected yield from each strip in each trial. Moving on to the double versus single trial type, treatment 1 was a single fungicide application, and treatment 2 was a double fungicide application. The product we tested was Delero. The first application was made at beginning of bloom or R2 stage, and the second application was also with Delero made at R3 stage, and it was about 10 days later after the first. Again, we looked at plant stand, we performed a disease rating, and we collected yield on each strip in each trial. Disease pressure was evaluated 10 to 14 days after the fungicide or biostimulant applications in every strip of each trial. Incidence and severity ratings are taken for Ascochyta blight, both foliar and stem, infections, and on white mold. Downy mildew and rust are also noted if present, but in 2025 there was nothing substantial to report for downy mildew, rust, and white mold. So we're just going to be looking at Ascochyta blight. Since cool, wet conditions leading up to pea flowering promotes disease development, I'll share the rainfall amounts that we had at each trial site in June and July. We can see that at each site, the percentage of normal rainfall was low, and for these 2 months during flowering for all sites. And the average rainfall across all sites was just 51% of normal in June and 29% of normal in July. So the drier conditions meant that disease pressure was low on the low side, and this reduces the likelihood of seeing a yield response to the fungicide. In fact, when we do these trials, we assess the disease risk factor with a score based on our fungicide decision worksheet. And at each site prior to the application, the disease factor was considered very low. Now for the disease rating results, we have on this graph the disease severity score, which is on a 1 to 7 scale, where 1 is least severe and 7 is most severe. And this is shown on the graph side going up. And along the bottom of the graph is each trial with paired or bar trios. The single versus none trials are on the left of the graph, and on the far right is the one double versus single trial. For each single fungicide trial, the gray bars on the left are peas without a fungicide application, so no untreated. Then beside those are beige bars and peas with a single fungicide application. And on the right side are, where applicable, are dark brown bars, and these are peas with a single fungicide application plus biostimulant tank mix. And now looking at the far right at the paired bars, the beige bar on the left side is the single fungicide application, and beside that is an orange bar, and that would be the double fungicide application. And there were no significant disease severity rating differences between fungicide and no fungicide treatments at any trial in 2025. And not shown here is disease incidence or the percentage of plants with symptoms, and there were no disease incidence differences between treatments either. And finally, there were no plant stand differences between treatments. Let's look at the yield results. This graph shows yield in bushels per acre along the side going up, and the 5 trials are along the bottom with the treatment bars laid out the same as the previous slide. And there were no significant yield responses to fungicide applications in 2025. So in summary, there were Ascochyta blight incidents. There were no Ascochyta blight incidence or severity differences between peas with a single or double fungicide application in 2025. And there were no significant yield differences either between treatments in 2025. So that's for the single versus none trials and the double versus single trial. As a result, each fungicide application resulted in a loss in profit equivalent to the cost of the product, which is about $15 to $20 per acre. And lastly, a few field pea fungicide use recommendations. In late June and July, or stages V10 to R2, start scouting the peas for those freckling symptoms of Ascochyta blight in the lower canopy. If there is no disease and it's hot, or if it's dry, you may be able to hold off spraying. Fine-tune decision using MPS G's fungicide decision worksheet to assess the disease risk. And this sheet is available on our website. It's also shown on the screen here at the bottom. And finally, with fungicide timing, fungicides are effective more as a, or mostly as a preventative measure. So it is important to make applications at the early stages of infection and also at early flowering to contain disease in the lower canopy. If symptoms do not move up beyond the lower 1/3 of the plant canopy by flowering stage, large yield losses would not be expected. If you're interested in learning more about these results, every trial result is available in the On-Farm Network database, available at manitobapulse.ca/onfarmnetwork, or follow the QR code on the screen. As always, if you're interested in participating in an on-farm trial like this on your own farm, please get in touch with me. Thanks for listening today. I've been Chris. Follow us on social media to stay up to date.